All right. Good morning, everybody. I see the Zoom room is starting to fill up. Good to see everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. Go ahead and let us know who you are and where you're from and your Penn State class year. Drop that information in the chat. We have a great coffee hour lined up for you today. We're going to talk to Rob Lawless. He is the founder of Robs10kFriends. Talk about that interesting project that he has going on. Talk about his experience at Penn State. And we will be getting started in just a minute or two. Again, let us know who you are and where you're from and your Penn State class year. And see Pete Sheridan from Blandon, class of 98. Pete, good to see you as always. See Tanya Seifert, Springfield, Virginia, class of 87. Good morning, Tanya. We have a great coffee hour lined up. We'll be starting in just a minute or two. I see Phil Goldstein, class of 66, down in Philadelphia. Good morning, Phil Goldsmith. Sorry. and Rob Lawless, King of Prussia. There we go. All right, good. Glad Rob is here. He is our guest today. And we will be getting started in just a moment. Where else would you rather be than a Zoom full of Penn Staters? I'm Paul Clifford, CEO of the Penn State Alumni Association, and welcome to the Alumni Association's Coffee Hour. Each week on Coffee Hour, you can expect to hear the voices of Penn Staters talking about what they are passionate about. And you can expect to feel the pride and the power of the Penn State network. We are recording this session and closed captions are available for this event. You can find that information in the chat in Zoom or in the comments on Facebook. Welcome to all our friends who are tuning in on Facebook Live this morning as well. We are going to talk to Rob Lawless. Rob is on a mission to spend 1 hour one-on-one with 10,000 different people to learn about their lives and see what comes from opening doors for no particular reason. Since starting the project in November of 2015, he has met over 3,800 people across 30 different states and 65 countries and has documented their stories through his Instagram at Rob10kFriends. We're going to drop that Instagram handle in the chat for you so you can check out Rob's Instagram. He's also been featured by press sources including the Kelly Clarkson Show, Now This, ABC World News Now, the New York Post, and Ryan Seacrest, and has supported himself through leveraging his social media following with over 38,000 followers to land partnerships with brands such as Penn Medicine, WeWork, and Peace Tea. I'm excited to welcome Rob Lawless to Coffee Hour. Rob, how are you this morning?
I am doing well. How are you?
Good. Let's see if we can get you on video here.
Oh yeah, so I was just clicking my video thing there. Hey, nice to meet you.
Good to see you. Let's start right at the beginning. How did you become a Penn State Nittany Lion?
I became a Penn State Nittany Lion because I'm the youngest of three, and my older sister chose to go there. So it's funny, this is bringing me back to because I was a Lion ambassador, so I used to tell this story a lot to prospective students. But I was in 7th grade when my older sister chose to go to Penn State. And I remember the day that we brought the whole family up to move her into Tenor Hall in East Halls. And at that point, like the only schools that I considered because I was a 7th grader were UNC because of their basketball team. And then Penn State kind of popped on the radar with my sister. And I remember that day just seeing people throwing the Frisbee around outside on the lawn. And my dad, while my sister and my mom got her dorm room situated, my dad took my brother and I around campus and we went and saw the creamery and we just walked around. And I hear sometimes people talk about that feeling when you step on campus and you know that's where you're supposed to be. I think I definitely had that as well. And then over the years, like it grew and it turned into exactly what I wanted out of a school. I went to a very small high school, um, and no surprise, but I wanted to go somewhere that had a lot of people. And
Right.
Penn State, the fact that it had 40,000 undergrad students was a huge draw for me. So it was the right balance for me of social life, academics, and like career, extracurricular opportunities. So even now, having gone through it and being 7.5 years out of school, I still believe it was the perfect fit. So I had a blast at Penn State. So it's really good to be here.
Awesome. I'm not going to make, I know you're out of practice. I'm not going to make you tell that story walking backwards.
Right.
As you mentioned, you were a Lion ambassador. What other activities were you involved with at Penn State?
So my freshman year, which again, I think is really helpful that my sister went there and then my brother went there as well. So they're 07, 2011, I'm 2013. My sister was like, you should get involved in Thon. I had known of it from her time there, but she said, you should do a committee and you should do morale, or which I think now is known as dancer relations,
Yes.
because she knew that I was outgoing. And so that was the very first thing that I did at Penn State, which was hugely important because I I met a lot of people there that then encouraged me to join other clubs. Like that became my first family of friends. My brother was a junior at the time, but he left in the winter to go to a co-op with Johnson and Johnson. And so midway through my freshman year, I didn't have him anymore. But I by that time had my own group of friends. So then that spring, I became part of the recharting class of Beta. And then that next year, my sophomore year, I joined Lion Ambassadors. I joined a new morale committee for Thon. Oh, and I did Habitat for Humanity trips, uh, freshman, sophomore, and junior year over spring breaks. Um, and then Lion Ambassadors, I did morale my junior year as well. And then I became a homecoming captain junior
Wow.
into senior year for alumni relations. So it was like every year I would add a new social
Yes.
extracurricular activity to my plate. But again, that was such a big impact on my life today, and I'm still very close with a lot of those people.
Well, I think we're identifying a common thread, and that's connecting with a lot of people. And we're going to get to that in just a couple minutes. I'm not going to ask you to redo your line dances that you learned as a
Right.
dancer relations captain, because I know that's a couple years out of practice. That might be putting you on the spot a
Yeah,
little
thank you.
too much. But after your time at Penn State, which sounds like you had just a great experience here in Happy Valley, you graduate with a degree in finance, minors in accounting and entrepreneurship, and then you launch your career at Detroit. You called this the first job that you had. You called it a reach job coming out of college. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, so I know when I studied finance in my mind, so I was fortunate I had internships like after sophomore year I worked at Pico or Exelon in Philadelphia. And then after junior year I was part of the internship program at Dick's Sporting Goods in Pittsburgh. Uh, and then senior year, I was having studied finance, I thought investment banking or consulting were like the top two things that I wanted to go into. And I think at that time, a lot of my mindset too was take the most secure path that's going to get you a large salary, and then do that and try to rise the ranks within that world so that you can retire as early as possible and enjoy your life. And so Deloitte was just yeah, one of the big four, but I had interviewed for Deloitte Consulting, and I don't know, it just seemed like a reach company. I knew it was a prestigious one, but and still even thinking back on it, there's a lot of people now that they do like all this studying for case studies and stuff to make sure that they're prepared for the interviews. But for me, it was one of the only ones that I was really able to just talk about myself instead of talking about the company culture and what drew me to it. It was really them getting to know me, and it just went well. And so I got the offer, and I remember the partner who signed off on the hiring. So I was part of the Philadelphia class, and there was another Penn Stater, Steve Vigilante, who was also signed to that class. And the partner said, when I saw the names Lawless and Vigilante, he's like, easiest decision. So you both, I signed you right off. So I started my career at Deloitte Consulting. I did that for a year and 3 months.
Yeah.
And then I left for the opportunity to go to a tech startup in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I mean, based on your minor, you minored in entrepreneurship. Startups were of interest to you. Like you just mentioned, after a year and a half at Deloitte, you entered that world. Talk a little bit about that transition and kind of what attracted you to the startup world away from Deloitte.
Yeah, I was always attracted to it. And I think one of the cool things, I remember being a senior at Penn State when they had Startup Week. So the guys from Weebly coming back with their friends, and just being exposed to that tech world from San Francisco, it was always something that I had an interest in. And yeah, I tell people now, I don't know if Penn State had an entrepreneurship major at the time that I was in school, but I think if they did, I may have majored in that. But I did it as a minor. It was actually the engineering entrepreneurship because it was through the engineering school.
Right.
But I yeah, I at Deloitte, I knew I didn't want to do that for 40 years until retirement. And I wasn't necessarily seeking to leave Deloitte, but I adopted the mindset that if an opportunity came up, I would jump on it. And I was working on a project in Kentucky, and the senior consultant on that project was from Houston. And we were just talking about entrepreneurship. And he said, my friend Ben is the director of sales at a company in Philadelphia at a startup. You should talk to him. So I talked to Ben and I said, listen, I'm not interested in joining your company, but I am interested in your path of going from private equity to the startup world because I could see myself doing something similar in the future. And I just would love to understand what that was like for you. And the more we talked, actually, the more I became interested in the startup. At the time, they had $7 million in funding, which for a Philly company was really good.
Right.
Like you didn't really hear that. Um, and the software that they were working on, it was a business intelligence data analytics platform. So a lot of the partners in Deloitte were talking about this software called Tableau at the time, which was basically just a more fancy way to create charts and dashboards than Excel. Uh, and this company was doing that on a smaller scale for small to mid-sized businesses. So I thought it was a great opportunity. So I joined them as their 80th employee. I was the fifth guy on their outbound sales team. And then we grew that team from 5 people up to 19 people over the next year. And I was just rising very quickly through there. And then so I joined them October 2014. In February of 2016, they laid off 20% of the company. And my team went from 19 back to 5. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
ultimately left. And in that time, I started the project that I'm on now, which is Robs10kFriends. And I started this in November of 2015.
This is the Penn State Alumni Association's Coffee Hour. I'm Paul Clifford. I'm joined by Rob Lawless. He is the founder of Rob's 10K Friends. So let's talk about that. Let's dive into that project. Where did the idea come from, first of all?
I always tell people, so twofold from my end, like because I was so involved at Penn State, one of the things that I really enjoyed was being in that atmosphere where I was always running into familiar faces. If I was on the way to class, I was always stopping to say hi to someone. If I was out at the bars, I always saw people other than the group that I went with. And for me, that feeling of familiarity was something that brought me a lot of fulfillment. And then when I went from that atmosphere to Deloitte and just working behind a desk, being on a small team, I felt like I didn't have that anymore. And so that for me was one of the tougher transitions of going from school to the professional world. So firstly, I wanted to recapture that sense of community and familiarity with the people around me. And then two, having minored in entrepreneurship, I had the job with Deloitte and I was like, okay, I don't think this is it for me for the rest of my career. A part of me wanted to always be that person who would take a leap and take a chance and do my own thing. And I always just thought it would take a ton of upfront creativity and effort, which it has. But the combination of the two of those things, I was like, I would love to do a journey where I'm meeting people. And for me, 10,000 was the thing that made it into this journey that made it worth following, or that it made it worth being part of for people. because it wasn't just a side project. It wasn't just a New Year's resolution. It was me dedicating my life to completing this goal and then sharing these stories for other people. And so the more I've thought about it over the years, the goal is really to be a positive example of what human connection should look like, and then to treat human connection as an experience rather than a transaction, which is, I feel like, something that often happens in the professional world. Like, people lose that sense of wanting to meet each other for the experience, and they start to think more of, okay, what's the return on this investment of my time? But yeah, those are the reasons why I've started, and it's been awesome so far, and it's just continuing to blossom into what it will eventually become. Oh, you're on mute right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned over 3,800 people, 60 plus countries, 35 states. You've driven across the country 6 times, but you've been featured on some, uh, pretty recognizable, I guess, TV and radio programs, right? You've been on nationally syndicated radio with Ryan Seacrest. You've been on the Today Show with Hoda and Jenna. Um, the Canadian version of the you've been on Your Morning, which is a Canadian version of the morning show. Uh, Talk a little bit, Kelly Clarkson, Jane Lynch.
Mhm.
God, the list goes on and on. First of all, did you expect that piece of that? Was that something that you were looking at when you started this? Was the press coverage, or was that just a byproduct of you starting to meet with one-on-one with 10,000 people?
I always thought that it had the potential to get press, and it had the
Yeah,
potential to have people be interested in it. But it was never something that I pushed. Like, I never advertised the project. Even when I first started it, I didn't tell any of my friends that I was doing it. I just kind of let them find out on their own. And it's been the same with the press. Like, the press has just kind of found out about me on its own. I mean, the Kelly Clarkson opportunity, I can trace that back to, so that happened, it aired last December, so 4 years after I started the project, but I can trace that back to May 5th of 2016, because I met someone who introduced me to a guy that wrote an article that another guy did, and so he did a TV spot on me, and then another girl in the Philly area saw that, followed my project for a few years. Eventually, she did a TV spot on me, and then that caught the attention of the producers of the Kelly Clarkson show when they were first starting, because they have this good neighbor feel
right.
to her show, and they were like, your project fits right in with that, so they flew me out there for that. But even the New York Post was because a girl that I met in Hoboken just knew the writer there, and that girl from Hoboken, I had met her when I was living there, but she had been following my project for 3 years because of a guy that I met that she went to high school with. So
Right.
yeah, it's all, I expected it, but I have and still kind of just sit back, and for me, it's like I'm letting the market tell me how interesting the project is.
Right.
And so when they cover it, I'm like, okay, it's in a good spot. It's validation to me that I'm on a good path to keep going.
So, how do you find friends? How do you source the people who become part of the 10,000?
Good question. In the beginning, so when I left Deloitte, I was doing sales at the tech startup. It's called RJ Metrics, or was called RJ Metrics. So every day, my job was to find and email like 50 to 100 new people and ask them for their time. And I got really good at not being afraid of rejection and following up if I didn't hear back from someone. So I just translated that right into reaching out to people for the project. And in the beginning, so I was living in Philadelphia, in the actual city at the time. And there's a website called billypen.com, and they have a who's next list of like who's next in the culinary scene or the art scene or the music
Right.
scene. And I started to email those people and just followed up, and I would message people on Instagram as well. And I think because I didn't have any type of catch to it, people were like, sure, I'll sit down with you.
Yeah.
And then after I had met 8 people, I started an Instagram account, which I always planned to do. I always wanted to document it there. Um, but I started that, and then if someone would like a photo, I would reach out to them. If they followed me because of a hashtag, I would reach out to them. And then people started reposting pictures to their Instagrams, and they would say, hey, I met this guy, Rob. He's doing this cool project. Follow along to be part of it. And then the press started to happen. And so it's kind of been a mix between press and people reposting it over the last several years. And along the way, I've had some really cool opportunities. Like I met a guy from a YouTube channel called Yes Theory. And they, at this point, they have 6 million subscribers on YouTube. They have the most loyal audience of anyone that I've ever met through my project. But they posted one Instagram story about me. And that day, 4,000 people started following me, and 400 of them reached out to me to meet from all over the world. And then in recent months, I've started posting on TikTok to just kind of play around with my story there. I posted a video that it was just me saying, hey, do you want to meet me? I'm doing this project. For the last 5 years, I've been hosting these hour-long conversations. And I think I've got over 1,000 messages from that TikTok. Wow. Yeah. So, because I think the concept is proven now, and people see that I've met like all of these people and that it's a bit established. And so they're more interested in being part of it now, but a lot of it is inbound now to where, and then you asked about how do I choose now that I have, okay, so up until the pandemic started, everything was in person. The first 3,259 people were all in person. And so I was kind of limited by who was around me and who I could get to in time. I try to meet 4 people every day. But once the pandemic started, I just was like, okay, I'm going virtual. So I really didn't have that limit, and people were reaching out from all over the world. And so now my priority is to make sure it's as diversified as possible, which is cool because I get people who message me from India. I have a ton of people who message me from South America, Africa, Europe, like all these different places. So I try to do like background, ethnicity, age, gender. Like I just want it to be a thing that people see other people like them as part of the project so that they feel encouraged to be part of it as well.
Absolutely. So what has been your most interesting encounter since you started the project?
For context, I lived in, so I started the project in Philadelphia. The first year and a half was there. 8 months after I started it, I was laid off from the tech company. And that was July of 2016. So at that point, I decided to dive into this full time. So I finished out my lease in Philadelphia, which was like 11 more months. And then my friend TJ, who was actually student body president my junior year, he was a friend of mine and we were roommates senior year. He invited me to live out in Los Angeles with him because he had an extra bedroom in his apartment. And he said, I can just host you. So that was the first time I drove across the country, summer of 2017. And I went out there to live with him. Now I'm losing track of why I'm even telling you this. What was the question again?
About your most interesting encounter.
Oh, yes. Thank you. So I'm out in LA and I went back in 2018 and I was there for 9 months, but I decided to go down to San Diego for a weekend in that time. And I crashed with these random guys who were friends of a guy that I had done a podcast with. They became part of the project. But while I was down there, my cousin introduced me to this guy, Tyson. And when he responded to our email introduction, he said, yeah, this sounds awesome. Do you want to go up in a modern or historical aircraft when we meet? And I said, yeah, that sounds awesome. So I met him at the hangar in San Diego. I park my car, I get in his car, we go through the fence, and we drive to where the airplane is parked. And I kid you not, it looks like a toy airplane. And he's like, yeah, it's amateur built, so you don't have to fly in it if you don't want. And I didn't know that it was amateur built prior to that. And immediately I was like, do I get in the plane and then it crashes and I die and my mom is really upset because he told me that he had built it himself, or do I get in it and it's a cool experience that I get to talk about? So fortunately it was the latter, but went in the plane. Yeah, it literally said experimental on the side. But it was a it was a 4-seater, and I got in, and yeah, we took off, and it was such a unique experience because that was the first time that I was in a plane that small, and so you really feel every shift of the
Right.
wind and every little drop and whatnot. And so for me, I say it was a combination of fighting off a panic attack, trying not to throw up from the G forces,
Right.
and having a really good time at the same time. And so we spent our hour flying over the coast of San Diego, and we were just cruising over the ocean and just looking at the coastline. And so sometimes I'll have moments like that where I'm in a plane thousands of feet above the ground with someone I just met, and I'll think to myself, how did I get here? Like, this used to be just an idea in my head that I once wrote in an
Right.
iPhone note, and now I'm flying over the coast of San Diego. So that was definitely one of the most unique experiences that I've had. And then I also had the opportunity to fly out to Hawaii for free because I met a flight attendant who offered me his buddy pass. And so I got to go out there. I met random people at a hostel. I ended up attending a local 78-year-old woman's birthday party kind of by mistake, but like became friends with the whole family there. So I've had some cool experiences, and for me, it's like it's just cool to see what can come of genuinely taking an interest in people, because none of those things were things that I would have dreamed up or shot for. They were just things that happened as a result of me starting to go out and meet new people.
Yeah. So I'm sure when you meet people, they're really interested to hear your story, right? They're really interested to hear about this project. But the purpose of the project is for you to learn their story. So what does a conversation look like? Like how do you maximize that hour that you're spending with someone?
I think so. I I like to learn their story and I share it as a byproduct, but in my mind, I see the purpose of the hour as us getting to know each other as best as we can and
Yeah.
to share that connection. So my best conversations are a two-way street of them learning as much about me as I'm learning about them. And it's sometimes a misconception because when people look at my Instagram account, it's me pictured with everyone that I've met and then their story below it. And so a lot of people will be like, "Oh, you interviewed my friend," or "You should interview this person." And I always tell them I'm not interviewing people. For
Right.
me, it's more of like catching up with an old friend at a bar that you just haven't met yet. And I actually have a blog post that I send out to everyone before I meet them, and I say, "PSA, I'm not interviewing people." And a lot of times people are like, "Oh, this is so nice to read that because it takes off the pressure, and I feel like
Yeah.
I can just have a conversation with you now." And so that's how it goes. I mean, some of them, there's so many different dynamics to it based on people's personalities too. Some people reach out to me because they're really shy and they want to push their comfort zone. And in those conversations, sometimes it is a bit more difficult to get their like story or just to have that conversation. So it's a lot more of me driving the conversation with questions.
Right.
I've had people that I've talked to who we start chatting and then they just go. And then 60 minutes later, I'm like, "Hey, I'm sorry, but I have to run." And I couldn't get a word in. And then I have people where it's a nice volley back and forth. But yeah, it's a very casual interaction. But I am genuinely interested in who people are. And I have found over time that the best way for me to do that is to get to know there's a framework called Ford, which I had learned about a few years into starting my project. And I would always think about people's lives like timelines. Like,
Right.
what is the story of your life on the timeline? What are you doing when you're a kid in high school, now, after, in the future? But Ford stands for family, occupation, recreation, and dreams. And so those are the four main categories that all make up who we are. And so for me, asking people questions within those categories has been a really good way to get to know them and to get their story.
That's amazing. Uh, so as I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking, okay, Rob started at Deloitte, went to a startup, and then started this project. How does Rob make money? How is it a project? Is it business? How is this supported? Kind of give us a peek behind the curtain.
Yeah, for sure. So when I started it, I thought to myself, okay, I have 3 years of savings. I mean, I worked for a financial advisor in high school, so I've always been good with my money and saving it.
Right.
Um, I was fortunate enough to pay off my student loans within 3 years of graduating. And so when I went into this full time, fortunately, I didn't have any debt. And I had these savings, and the goal was don't run out of money. That was the business plan. And I knew as that there, if you grew an audience on a platform like Instagram, there were people that were leveraging that for partnerships with brands. And so I thought to myself, okay, it's a concept that is typically well received and it's doing good for the world. Like there's probably some brands that would want to align with my project. And if it's getting media attention, they might want to be the brand that the media sees as supporting this project to go forward because it's having a good impact on the world. And so still working towards that point, but I have been fortunate enough to have partners as early as March of 2017. And at that time, I had an Instagram account that had about 7,000 followers. And there was a guy, Chris, and we met for my project at a bar in Philly. And he said, "Man, I wish I could support you in some way. I think what you're doing is so cool."
Right.
And I was like, "You can support me if you want to be a partner. I'm trying to do monthly partners where I just tell my audience this project is presented this month by so and so." And so it was March 10th, I think. And I said, "It's March 10th. If you want to give me $200 for the rest of the month, I'll tag you in every other post this month." And he said, "I'll give you 300 and we'll call it a deal." So Chris became my partner from March of 2017. And then because I was posting presented this month by Fishtown Pharmacy, then this urgent care center in Philadelphia, Vibe Urgent Care, reached out to me and said, "Hey, we see you're doing partnerships. What's the deal with that?" And I said, "Oh, I'm trying to do it on a monthly basis. I'll meet you for my project and then we can chat about it. And if you want, you can be my partner for April." And then that's what happened. And then I went to my dentist and he said, "Why didn't you ask me to be your partner? I wanted to partner with you." And so then that was April, May, and then it was a leadership program. And so just it kind of kept rolling. And then I went out to LA for the first time and I had a t-shirt sponsor out there. And then I came back and most random, like, and that was the beautiful thing about doing the project. It was just people that were part of it that wanted to help further it. So it was a weekly publication, a photographer, a dog walking company, a wedding band. These were all businesses that partnered with me in that small way. And then when I did the Ryan Seacrest show, I was a
Right.
part of his radio show 3 summers ago, the summer of 2018. Then I took that audio and I sent that to the head of partnerships at WeWork and I said, "Hey, I have this project. I meet a lot of people at your spaces. I would love to do a partnership where I'm showing off your space and just how it's been a great place for me to meet people." And so we did a trial partnership in April of last year out in Los Angeles when I was living there. And then the partnership started. We did 3 months from June until September. And then where they re-upped it for another 6 months. And so our partnership actually ended the week before quarantine started, which is great timing because I
Yeah.
wouldn't have been able to go in and meet people. But that has been it over the last, and the bigger piece of that really is that I have had people who've been willing to help me. Like my
Yeah.
friend TJ, I mentioned I lived with him in LA. I lived with him for a year and 3 months over 3 separate periods of time. And he never charged me a dime in rent. He just wanted to help further the project. And my friend Nick and Catherine, also Penn Staters, all my friends, they said, "We have an extra bedroom in Hoboken if you want to come stay with us." So I was supposed to stay with them for 2 months and we just enjoyed living together. So that turned into 9 months. And that really allowed me to get the New York Post, to get ABC World News Now, just being in that area. So cutting out the rent piece was really important as well. And then the time in between, I was back at my parents' house in the suburbs of Philadelphia. So that's where I'm at now. And going forward, I had just posted about this last weekend. I'm planning to do training sessions, just seminars on people to learn how to effectively talk about themselves and share their stories, and how to effectively ask people good questions to understand their stories, because I'm so used to sharing my path because I do it so often,
Right.
and I feel like I can do it in a chronological way that makes sense. But sometimes people are all over the place, and it's, for me, a skill that I think is really valuable for interviews, first dates, client relationships. It's just something that we should all really have a grasp on, but we don't have a lot of opportunities to practice. So I put out, hey, if I ran this seminar, would people be interested in paying to be part of it? And I had over 700 people that responded yes. So I'm kind of in the process of putting that together. And then one of the goals this year was to get into public speaking, which is still a goal. Like I plan to start speaking at universities and corporations about the project, specifically like incoming university students, freshmen,
Right.
the importance of making those connections as a freshman, and helping them understand how valuable that is long term, from like a fulfillment standpoint, from an opportunity standpoint, but also the perspective and empathy that you gain from hearing someone else's story that is different than yours. So that's something that I plan to start, and I'm in talks with a couple of people about speaking at their universities, and I plan to just grow that and grow that message over the next coming years.
That's amazing. As I listen to you tell your story and talk, I'm thinking about like 100 different projects that could pop out of this project, right? Rob should have a podcast. Rob should write a book. Rob should go on a speaking tour. All those kind of things. Any big plans for? And I know you're not. I know like 10,000 is still on the horizon, right? But are there any plans that are kind of growing alongside of this besides the speaking piece?
For sure. I actually, and they like float in and out, and it's kind of, so at the start of the year, I was looking through my Instagram messages, and I had one from Drew Scott, who is one of the Property Brothers, and he runs his own production company. And so he messaged me and he was like, "Hey, let's hop on a call and chat about if there's an opportunity to somehow turn this into a TV show of you meeting people." Um, and then I was supposed to meet with his director of development in New York City, and COVID happened and her flight got canceled. And you know how that goes. And so that opportunity for now kind of went away, but I was able to, I actually flew out to LA last month for a meeting with this guy, Zach King. And fortunately, I was able to stay with TJ again before meeting Zach, and then stay with him afterwards. Um, but Zach is the third most popular creator on TikTok. He has about 50 million followers there, and he had seen my project, and he messaged me to meet. So we actually went lobster diving off the coast of California together. So another fun experience.
Yeah.
But while I was out there, I texted Drew, and he invited me to come meet with him and his wife in his backyard, and we did like a social distance meetup where I was on one side of a long table and they were on the other, and we had our masks on the whole time, which was cool. Uh, but yeah, I've like kept in touch with him, and so I think that there's a potential for either a documentary or a TV series or
Right.
expanding into YouTube. I There's so, like, I like the authenticity of meeting people and no one paying attention for the actual meeting and then just me writing about it afterwards. But I think there's a lot of power in video, and I think that that like creating that impact through video is something that I want to do. So telling people stories in a more, like, more vivid way, whether it's a YouTube series where I'm doing an activity with them and capturing their story at the same time, or we're turning it into something bigger. Those are all on the table. Uh, and that's what I love about the project, is at the heart of it, I'm just meeting 10,000 people one on one for 1 hour each. Like, for me, in my mind, if I do that, I reach the goal.
Right.
Uh, it doesn't really matter how it looks or what form it takes. And so there's room to play around with all those things. And like I said earlier, it's proven now. Like, I think in the beginning people questioned whether I was committed to it, but having done 3,900 people with really no major backing, it's just
Right.
really all been me and like the support of my friends hosting me. I think it's poised to get to a place where some of those bigger things are going to be really successful when they happen.
Absolutely. This is the Penn State Alumni Association's Coffee Hour. I'm Paul Clifford. I'm joined by Rob Lawless. He's the founder of Robs10kFriends. Rob, we like to have a little bit of fun here at the end of Coffee Hour. So I'm going to throw some quick questions at you in our lightning round here, and just get some another glimpse into what makes you you. So
Sure.
your favorite Penn State memory.
Oh, oh man. That's a good one. I think it goes back to the semester of like joining Lion ambassadors. I think that's an extended memory, but I made so many good friends in that time, and I think that was what I was most involved with when I was a student. So it really was like that ramping into this lightning round. Yeah, just ramping into that. And I'm still in touch. Like I just was playing Settlers of Catan virtually with two of my friends from Lambs on Friday night.
That's funny. Your favorite? Well, give them a shout out. Who are those friends?
Oh, that's Logan Cawley and Natalie Masters. I think you might know them. They
Yeah,
said that they had chatted with you before.
absolutely. All right. Favorite class at Penn State?
Oh, my engineering entrepreneurship class with Bob Bury. I think he's still there. Awesome. He taught you how to think outside of the box.
Um, One person that you haven't talked with as part of your 10,000 that's kind of on your wish list that you want to talk to.
John Bellion, he is a musician that he's like a pop musician that not a lot of people know, but I think he's a musical genius.
So, what has been your most unusual We Are moment? You've traveled all over the country, traveled all around the world, and talked to people around the world on this project. Where was the place where you heard We Are, or you encountered a Penn Stater that you didn't expect it?
So the summer after I graduated, I went on a short Euro trip with my older sister, and we went to Amsterdam, and we were doing one of those bar crawl things.
Wow.
So we were at the bar, and I went to the bathroom, and I was like, so I was at the one urinal, and then there were two, and I looked to my left, and I was like, wait, that dude looks familiar. And then I looked to my right, and I was like, wait, that guy looks familiar too. They were both guys that I had just graduated from my finance degree or finance program with, who just happened to run into in the other side of the world in a bathroom on a bar tour.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Your favorite Penn State sport?
Favorite Penn State sport? I mean, I never missed a football game when I was a student there, but I always loved watching volleyball as well.
And your favorite flavor of creamery ice cream?
Oh, um, I I like Peachy Paterno when I was there. I like the creaminess of it. I really feel like you get the creaminess in that flavor.
That's amazing. Well, Rob, hey, we want to thank you for sharing your story here on Coffee Hour. We appreciate it. It's interesting. Tell people how they can find more information about the project. I know you mentioned your Instagram page, but you have a website too, where if people want to be supportive, they could go out there as well.
Yeah, I have a website. It's robs10kfriends.com. And then I'm Robs10kFriends on Instagram is mainly like the landing page where I keep track of everyone. Um, it's also on Twitter and Facebook as well, but Instagram is the most up to date. And then I have a Patreon account too. I didn't mention that. That is another way that I support myself. Is on Patreon. I have like 42 people who have subscribed since I started that this summer. So yes, and then my email is robs10kfriends@gmail.com if anyone wanted to email me for any reason. But yeah, that's how they can get in touch. And I appreciate you guys having me on. Like I said, I huge fan of Penn State, and I feel like it really was the formative years of my life and played a big part in why I'm doing what I'm doing today. So thank you for having me on to talk about it.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. Thanks for allowing us to share your story. To our guests who have joined us on Facebook and here in Zoom, thank you. If you're a member of the Alumni Association, we are so grateful to have your support. If you're not, go on our website today at alumni.psu.edu, and you too can become a member of the world's largest alumni association. Thanks for all you do for the university, for the glory, and for the future. We are
Penn State.